I smiled at the exact moment the lawyer broke the wax seal and read, "Reserved addendum." Just a smile. And Calvin lunged across the conference room, striking me in front of everyone. He thought that slap would wipe the smile off my face. But my smile wasn't for him. It was for the legal trap that had already snapped shut weeks ago. If you've ever been invisible in your own family, you'll understand how a single smile can overturn an entire will. My name is Nora Whitfield, and at 34, I've learned that some families operate on a caste system nobody talks about but everyone understands. In our house, there were two surnames that mattered: Rourke and everyone else. I work as a pediatric nurse at North Ferry Children's Hospital in Millwater. 12-hour shifts that smell of antiseptic and sound like monitors beeping. It's honest work, helping kids heal. But to Calvin Rourke, it might as well be charity volunteering. Wiping noses for a living, he'd say, cutting into his steak at dinner while I pushed food around my plate. Calvin married my mother, Elaine, 7 years ago. She was still grieving my father, vulnerable in that specific way that makes predators circle. Calvin swooped in with his construction company money, his pristine Ford F-150, and promises of stability. What Mom got instead was a tyrant in a polo shirt. The old Victorian townhouse in Millwater's historic district became his kingdom the day they signed the marriage certificate. He moved in with his son Tyler, 28, soft around the middle, and convinced that sharing DNA with Calvin made him royalty. They commandeered the best rooms, the garage, the very air we breathed. "Simple rules," Calvin announced that first week, standing in what used to be my father's study. "Who pays the bills makes the decisions. Questions?" Mom chose silence. She'd perfected the art of shrinking, of becoming wallpaper in her own home. Her nurse's aide salary barely covered her car payment, and Calvin never let her forget it. I watched her disappear into herself, word by unspoken word. I kept my room, barely, the small bedroom overlooking the garden, where I'd grown up, where Dad used to read me stories. Calvin tolerated my presence because throwing out your wife's daughter looked bad. But tolerance isn't acceptance, and I learned to count every dollar I contributed to groceries, every minute I spent in common areas, every breath that might offend the king. Tyler made sport of reminding me about the hierarchy. Dad's house, Dad's rules. He'd smirk, spreading out on the couch I'd helped Mom pick out years ago. He worked for Rourke Construction and Sons, the N Sons added recently, though Tyler's contributions seemed limited to showing up late and leaving early. The only person who treated me like family was Grandma Violet, Mom's mother. She lived across town in a modest 2-story that smelled like lavender and old books. Every Sunday, I'd drive over for tea, and for 3 hours, I could breathe. "Don't let him chase you out," she'd say, her fingers still elegant despite the arthritis. "This too shall pass, sweetheart. Men like Calvin always overreach." I thought she meant it philosophically. I didn't know she was already planning. When Grandma Violet's health started declining last year, small strokes that stole words and memories, Calvin's interest in her sharpened. He'd never bothered with her before, but suddenly he was offering to help with her finances and asking about her estate planning. "Just want to make sure Elaine's taken care of," he'd say, that salesman's smile stretching across his face. Mom was grateful. I was suspicious, but suspicion without proof is just paranoia. And in a house where you're already unwelcome, paranoia marks you as the problem. The day Grandma forgot my name was the day I started paying closer attention. Calvin had visited her that morning. "Checking in," he said. She'd been fine the day before, sharp enough to beat me at Scrabble. Something was shifting in the house's foundation, and it wasn't just the old Victorian settling. Calvin started having meetings with estate lawyers in the study, door locked. Tyler began dropping hints about big changes coming with the smugness of someone who knows they're protected. "Maybe you should start looking for your own place," he suggested one evening, apropos of nothing. "You know, spread your wings. 34 and still living at home doesn't look good." I wanted to remind him that 28 and failing upward at Daddy's company looked worse, but I'd learned the value of silence. In this house, There were Rourke's and everyone else. But Grandma Violet had taught me something different. During all those Sundays over Earl Grey and shortbread, sometimes the smartest way to handle a bully isn't to strike back. Sometimes it's to wait, observe, and let them unravel on their own. I just had to make sure I was holding the other end when they did. The document that changed everything was hiding in plain sight, mixed with grocery receipts and junk mail on Calvin's desk. I wasn't snooping, just looking for the Wi-Fi password he'd changed again. When I saw the letterhead, Second Lien Mortgage Agreement. Grandma Violet's address stared back at me. My hands shook as I photographed the pages with my phone. A $200,000 lien against her house. Signed 3 months ago, the signature looked like hers. But something was off. The V in Violet too sharp. The final T trailing wrong. I knew her handwriting like my own. I'd saved every birthday card, every note. The beneficiary? Rourke Construction and Sons. That night, I barely slept. Calvin had been visiting Grandma twice a week. Always alone, always with paperwork. Insurance forms, he told Mom. Medicare updates, and Mom, trusting and exhausted from double shifts, had been grateful for the help. I started my investigation carefully. First, the bank statements. Grandma had added me to her accounts years ago. Just in case, she'd said. I hadn't checked them since. Now, scrolling through transactions on my phone during break at the hospital, I found the bleeding. $5,000 here, $8,000 there. Consultation fees to companies I'd never heard of. Wire transfers that coincided with Calvin's visits. In 6 months, nearly $50,000 had vanished. The nursing home called it sundowning when elderly patients became confused in the evening, but Grandma's confusion seemed to peak whenever Calvin left. Our family lawyer, Mr. Brennan, had retired suddenly 2 months ago. Health issues, Calvin explained, already recommending his replacement, someone from his poker game. I decided to find my own. Harper Lowell's office occupied the 3rd floor of a converted bank building downtown. Lowell and Paxton LLP had the kind of quiet prestige that whispered old money and older secrets. Harper herself was 60-something, silver-haired, and had eyes that missed nothing. I can't discuss another person's legal matters, she said carefully after I showed her what I'd found. But I can educate you about elder financial abuse, hypothetically. For an hour, she laid out a roadmap I'd never known existed. No contest clauses, provisions that disinherited anyone who challenged a will, reserved addendums, sealed modifications that superseded previous instructions, undue influence, the legal term for what I'd been witnessing. If someone can prove coercion or diminished capacity, Harper said, sliding a business card across her mahogany desk, the perpetrator doesn't just lose their inheritance. They face criminal charges, asset forfeiture, prison. She taught me about evidence chains, contemporaneous documentation, the difference between influence and undue influence. Most importantly, she explained how someone could build an airtight case without alerting the perpetrator. Hypothetically, she added with a sharp smile. I paid her consultation fee from my savings and left with a legal pad full of notes and a plan. Calvin thought he was smart, using his construction company as a shell for the transfers. But construction companies leave trails, permits, inspections, supply orders. I started mapping discrepancies, aided by my high school friend who worked at city planning. These invoices don't match any active sites, Jake told me over coffee, scrolling through his tablet. Rourke's been billing for ghost projects. The pattern emerged like a diagnosis. Calvin would visit Grandma, get her to sign something. Then money would flow to fictitious construction projects. The funds would disappear into equipment purchases that probably never existed, contractor payments to companies registered in Delaware. I documented everything, spreadsheets with transaction dates, screenshots of forged signatures, medical records showing Grandma's cognitive evaluations, mostly good days, but enough bad ones for Calvin to exploit. Tyler, oblivious to my investigation, actually helped by bragging. Dad's got it all figured out, he said one night, beer loose on his tongue. Why wait for inheritance when you can leverage assets now? It's just business. I recorded him. Connecticut was a one-party consent state for recordings. Harper had made sure I knew that. The hardest part was staying quiet while Calvin tightened his grip. He'd convinced Mom that Grandma needed a financial conservator and was pushing papers at her. For her own good, he insisted over dinner. You've seen how confused she gets. Mom nodded, exhausted from another double shift, trusting her husband to handle things. I bit my tongue until it bled, counting days until I had enough evidence. 3 weeks before Grandma died, I made my move. Not to Calvin, to Grandma, on one of her clear days. I know what he's doing, I told her, holding her papery hand. And I know how to stop him. Her eyes, sharp as ever in that moment, met mine. I've been waiting for you to notice, she said. Now, let's discuss my real will. The one Mr. Brennan drew up before he retired. The one Calvin doesn't know about. She smiled then, the same smile I'd inherit for the conference room. He thinks he's playing chess, darling, but I've been playing Go. The evidence grew like a tumor, malignant and undeniable. I became a forensic accountant in my off hours, trading stethoscopes for spreadsheets, patient charts for paper trails. Every Tuesday, I'd visit Grandma with fresh flowers and hidden documents. On her clear days, and she had more than Calvin knew, we'd work through the plan Harper Lowell had helped design. On foggy days, I'd simply hold her hand and update my files. The bank records painted a damning picture. Cross-referencing Calvin's site visits with Grandma's withdrawals showed a pattern no honest jury could ignore. Within 48 hours of each visit, money moved. Always to Rourke Construction. Always for projects that existed only on paper. I found the ghost contractors through state registration databases. Shell companies with Delaware addresses, incorporated weeks before each transaction. The names were almost laughable. CRK Holdings, Rourke Asset Management, Tyler Industries, LLC. Calvin's ego wouldn't let him stray far from his own name. Jake from City Planning became my unwitting ally. Your stepfather's permit applications are a mess, he said over our third coffee meeting. Half these addresses are vacant lots. The other half haven't seen construction since the 90s. I photographed everything Jake showed me, careful to document the official stamps and dates. Chain of custody mattered. Harper had emphasized, every link had to hold. The medical documentation required more finesse. I couldn't access Grandma's records directly. HIPAA violations would tank the case, but I could request them as her healthcare proxy. The neurologist's notes were particularly useful. Patient shows intermittent confusion, particularly in evening hours. Lucidity varies. Recommend financial oversight. Calvin had been cherry-picking her worst moments. I realized, timing his visits for sundown, when the shadows in her mind grew longest. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Grandma's neighbor, Mrs. Patterson. She'd been keeping a log of visitors, a habit from 40 years of neighborhood watching. That man comes by Tuesday evenings, regular as clockwork, she told me, flipping through her meticulous notebook. Always carries a briefcase, stays exactly 1 hour. Your grandmother seems upset after. I photographed her logs with permission. Dates, times, duration of visits, all corresponding to the financial bleeds. The legal trap Harper helped design was elegant in its simplicity. First, new healthcare power of attorney documents, properly witnessed by medical staff during one of Grandma's lucid mornings. The hospital's ethics committee had strict protocols for capacity evaluation. 2 doctors, a social worker, videotaped consent, ironclad. Second, a codicil to her will, filed with Harper's firm and a second law firm for redundancy. The reserved addendum, sealed and witnessed, that would only be read if certain conditions were met. Conditions like someone challenging the will's validity or evidence of undue influence. Think of it as a legal landmine, Harper explained. Step on it, and it explodes. The Violet Trust was the masterpiece, structured to protect Grandma's assets while ensuring Mom's security. It named me as co-trustee with First National Bank. Calvin was specifically excluded due to potential conflicts of interest arising from business dealings. Every document was signed during documented periods of lucidity, with medical professionals as witnesses. Video recordings showed Grandma clear-eyed and articulate, explaining her wishes in detail. "I want my daughter Elaine protected," she said to the camera, "but I won't let anyone steal from my family through her kindness." The county prosecutor's office had an elder fraud division. I met with ADA Jennifer Morse in a conference room that smelled like burnt coffee and justice deferred. "This is extensive," she said, reviewing my files, "but we'll need more for criminal charges. Financial abuse cases are hard to prove beyond reasonable doubt." "What if he incriminates himself?" I asked. She leaned forward. "That would change everything." I started recording everything. Every dinner conversation where Calvin discussed Grandma's confusion. Every meeting with his poker buddy lawyer. Connecticut's one-party consent law was my shield. Tyler, perpetually careless, gave me the best material. "Once the old lady's estate is settled, Dad says I'm getting a promotion. Real money, not the penny ante stuff." "What about your stepsister?" his girlfriend asked one evening, not knowing I was in the kitchen. "Nora? She'll be lucky if Dad lets her stay through the funeral." I saved that recording in triplicate. The final piece came together 2 weeks before Grandma passed. Calvin, frustrated by the trust documents Harper had filed, made his fatal error. He tried to get Grandma to sign a revocation. Mrs. Patterson called me immediately. "He's there off schedule. Brought someone else. Tall man, suit." I arrived to find Calvin and his lawyer friend pressuring Grandma to sign papers. My phone, recording in my pocket, caught everything. "Just sign here, Violet. This will fix the confusion with the trust." I'm tired." "Sign the damn paper. You owe me this after everything I've done." I intervened then, playing the concerned granddaughter while documenting the attempted coercion. The lawyer fled. Calvin retreated, but not before threatening consequences. That night, I delivered everything to Ada Morse and filed formal complaints with Adult Protective Services and the State Banking Commission. The trap was set. All it needed now was for Calvin to walk into it. Grandma passed quietly on a Tuesday morning, holding my hand. Her last words were, "Make him pay for it, sweetheart, every penny." I promised her I would, and unlike Calvin's promises, I meant to keep mine. The house transformed into a pressure cooker after Grandma's death. Calvin's mask of civility slipped further each day, revealing the predator beneath the polo shirts and practiced smiles. "Your free ride ends after the will reading," he announced at breakfast. 3 days after the funeral. "Start looking for apartments." I buttered my toast with steady hands, years of pediatric emergencies having taught me to stay calm while chaos erupted. "Of course, Calvin, whatever you think is best." My compliance seemed to unsettle him more than resistance would have. He'd expected tears, pleas, perhaps even gratitude for letting me stay this long. Instead, I gave him nothing, a blank screen where he'd hoped to project his power. Tyler grew bolder with each passing day. He moved my belongings from the garage without asking, tossing boxes marked Dad's books into the rain. When I retrieved them silently, he laughed. "Getting sentimental about dead people's junk? That's pathetic, even for you." I documented everything, photos of damaged belongings, recordings of threats, the security camera I'd installed in my room, disguised as a phone charger, captured Tyler entering when I was at work, rifling through drawers. Mom drifted through it all like a ghost herself, grief and exhaustion making her translucent. She'd aged 5 years in 5 weeks, and Calvin made sure she knew her place. "Elaine needs rest," he'd say when I tried to talk to her. "Don't burden her with your drama." But late at night, I'd hear her crying in their bedroom. Once, she knocked softly on my door at 2 a.m., standing in the hallway like a lost child. "I miss her too," was all she said before Calvin's voice called her back to bed. The lock on my door changed first. I came home from a 12-hour shift to find my key useless, my room inaccessible. Calvin stood at the top of the stairs, new key dangling from his finger. "Security upgrade," he said. "You'll get a copy when you pay your share of the installation." The locksmith charge on his desk later. $500 for one interior door. I slept in my car that night, parked at the hospital. Security knew me. Didn't ask questions when I used the staff shower before my shift. But I made sure Harper Lowell knew about the illegal eviction attempt, documented with timestamps and photos. "He's escalating," she noted during our phone call. "Stay safe. The reading is in 2 weeks." 2 weeks of psychological warfare. Calvin cut off the hot water to my bathroom. "Plumbing issues," he claimed. "The Wi-Fi password changed daily. My designated shelf in the refrigerator mysteriously emptied each morning. Food thrown away, past expiration." I adapted, showered at the gym, used the hospital's Wi-Fi, kept non-perishables in my trunk. Each petty cruelty was cataloged, filed, added to the mounting evidence of hostility and harassment. The pressure revealed cracks in their alliance. Tyler, emboldened by assumed inheritance, started spending beyond his means. A new truck appeared in the driveway. Early inheritance distribution. He bragged to anyone who'd listen. The paper trail from the dealership would later prove interesting to investigators. Calvin's construction business began showing stress fractures too. Without Grandma's steady financial bleeding, cash flow tightened. I overheard heated phone calls about missed payroll, delayed materials, nervous suppliers. "It's temporary," he snarled at someone. "The estate settles next week." He'd already spent money he didn't have yet. The realization made me smile, an expression I quickly hid behind my coffee mug. My colleagues at the hospital noticed the changes: dark circles, weight loss, the way I flinched when my phone buzzed. Dr. Martinez pulled me aside after a particularly brutal shift. "Everything okay at home, Nora?" "Family stuff," I said, the understatement of the century. "It'll be resolved soon." She didn't push, but slipped me a card for employee assistance counseling. I pocketed it, knowing the only therapy I needed was justice. The final straw came 5 days before the will reading. I returned from work to find my room ransacked, legally entered with Calvin's key. My grandmother's jewelry box, the one thing I'd managed to salvage, lay empty on the bed. "Inventory for the estate," Calvin said when I confronted him. "Everything needs to be accounted for." Tyler wore my grandfather's watch the next day, the inscription visible when he reached for his beer. "To Violet, my eternal love." I took photos, added them to the file. That night, I moved the last of my important documents to a safety deposit box at Harper's recommended bank: birth certificate, passport, the USB drives with all my evidence backed up in triplicate. Calvin could ransack all he wanted now. He'd find nothing but clothes and old textbooks. "You're being paranoid," Mom whispered when we passed in the hallway, but her eyes said otherwise. She'd started keeping her purse with her at all times, sleeping with it under her pillow. 3 days before the reading, Calvin made his final mistake. He presented Mom with papers, a post-nuptial agreement that would cement his control over any inheritance she received. "Just a formality," he said. That salesman's smile stretched tight. "To protect our assets." Mom's hands shook as she read. I watched from the doorway, ready to intervene, but knowing she needed to see this herself. I need to think about it," she said finally. "What's to think about?" His voice carried an edge sharp enough to cut. "Don't you trust your husband?" She looked at me then, really looked at me for the first time in months. Something shifted in her face, a dawning recognition of what she'd allowed into our lives. "I need to think," she repeated, stronger this time. Calvin's face darkened, but he couldn't push harder without revealing too much. He retreated to his study, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. That night, Mom knocked on my door again. This time, she came inside. "I kept copies," she said quietly, pulling folded papers from her robe. "Of everything he's made me sign over the years. I hoped I was being paranoid." We sat on my stripped bed, reviewing documents by phone light. Property transfers, power of attorney forms, investment account modifications, all legal, all technically voluntary, all designed to strip her of autonomy piece by piece. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry I let him—" "You were grieving," I said, meaning it. He knew exactly when to strike. We held each other then. Mother and daughter united for the first time since Calvin's invasion. Outside my door. Footsteps paced the hallway. Calvin, sensing the shift in alliance, patrolling his crumbling kingdom. "What do I do?" Mom asked. "Show up to the will reading," I said. "And whatever happens, whatever you see, trust me, Grandma and I have a plan." She squeezed my hand, and for the first time in years, I felt like I had my mother back. The countdown had begun. 4 days until revelation. 4 days until Calvin Rourke learned what happened when you mistook kindness for weakness, silence for submission. 4 days until he understood why Grandma Violet had been smiling at the end. The morning of Grandma Violet's funeral had been gray and fitting, but the morning of the will reading blazed with inappropriate sunshine. I dressed carefully. Professional blazer, minimal jewelry, the kind of outfit that said, "Respectable granddaughter," to any watching eyes. In my purse, 3 USB drives with encrypted evidence, a fully charged phone set to record, and the sealed envelope Harper Lowell had given me for emergencies only. Calvin wore his best suit, the one reserved for wooing clients and intimidating suppliers. He'd even gotten a haircut, styled to project success and authority. Tyler flanked him in wrinkled khakis, already checking his phone for truck accessories he couldn't yet afford. Mom sat between us in the car, a buffer in beige. She'd barely spoken since our late-night conversation, but her hand found mine when Calvin wasn't looking. Small rebellions. The law offices of Brennan and Associates occupied a converted Victorian downtown, all dark wood and legacy whispers. Calvin had insisted on using Grandma's original lawyer, not knowing that Mr. Brennan had carefully orchestrated his own retirement to avoid this moment. "The junior partner will handle it," he'd assured Calvin. "Very capable." The junior partner turned out to be Samuel Chen, Harvard Law, with eyes that missed nothing and a poker face that would make casino dealers weep. He ushered us into a conference room where sunlight slanted across a mahogany table polished to mirror brightness. "Before we begin," Chen said, arranging documents with surgical precision, "I need to verify all parties present. State your names and relationship to the deceased for the record." A court reporter sat in the corner, fingers poised. Everything would be documented. Perfect. Calvin Rourke, husband of Elaine Whitfield Rourke, Violet's daughter. Tyler Rourke, stepson of Elaine. Elaine Whitfield Rourke, Violet's daughter. Nora Whitfield, Violet's granddaughter. Chen nodded, then produced a manila envelope sealed with red wax, an antiquated touch that Grandma would have loved. "This will was last updated 6 weeks before Mrs. Violet Whitfield's passing," he began. "All previous versions are hereby revoked and replaced." Calvin shifted forward, confident. He'd seen the earlier will, the one leaving everything to Mom. Simple, clean, exploitable. "The estate consists of the following: 1 residential property at 442 Elmwood Drive, valued at approximately $400,000. Investment accounts totaling $300,000. Personal effects and household contents, and 1 2018 Honda Accord." Tyler was already calculating his share. I could see it in his eyes. Calvin's hand rested possessively on Mom's shoulder. "To my daughter, Elaine Whitfield Rourke," Chen read, "I leave my love and the hope that she finds her strength again." Mom's breath hitched. Calvin's grip tightened. "The remainder of my estate is to be placed in the Violet Whitfield Revocable Trust, established on," Chen paused, checking the date, "6 weeks before my passing, trustees to be First National Bank and my granddaughter, Nora Whitfield." The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. "What?" Calvin's mask slipped, revealing fury beneath. "That's impossible. Check again." Chen's expression remained neutral. "There's more. The trust includes specific provisions. Elaine Whitfield Rourke shall have lifetime residency rights in the Elmwood property. which shall be maintained by the trust. Upon her passing or voluntary relocation, the property transfers to Nora Whitfield." "This is fraud," Calvin snarled, standing now. "Violet wasn't competent to make these changes. She had dementia." "Which brings us to the sealed addendum," Chen said calmly, producing another envelope. "To be opened only in case of will contestation or claims of undue influence." My phone, recording in my pocket, caught every word. The court reporter's fingers flew. In the hallway. Footsteps I'd been expecting. Dorothy Chen, the ADA, had mentioned she might observe as a private citizen interested in elder law. "I strongly advise," Calvin's lawyer friend began. "Open it," Calvin demanded. "This is bullshit. Open it now." Chen broke the seal with deliberate ceremony. The reserved addendum, witnessed by Dr. Patricia Huang and Dr. Robert Morrison of Millwater General Hospital, states the following. He cleared his throat. The room held its breath. "Should any party contest this will or claim undue influence, the following evidence shall be submitted to the probate court and relevant authorities. Documentation of systematic financial exploitation, totaling $247,000, forged signatures on mortgage documents, recorded conversations demonstrating coercion, medical records showing attempts to obtain signatures during documented periods of confusion." Calvin had gone pale. Tyler looked confused. Mom stared at her folded hands. "Furthermore," Chen continued, "any party found guilty of financial exploitation of the deceased shall be subject to disgorgement of all improperly obtained assets and barred from any benefit from the estate, per Connecticut General Statute Section 45A, 266A. The trap had snapped shut, but Calvin, in his arrogance, would provide the final nail. "You set this up," he said, turning to me with volcanic fury. "You manipulated a sick old woman." "I have video recordings," Chen interrupted smoothly, "of Mrs. Whitfield explaining her wishes in detail, with full medical competency evaluations performed before each revision. Would you like to see them?" "This won't stand. I'll sue every one of you. Tyler, we're leaving." But Tyler hadn't moved. He was staring at his phone, where notifications had begun flooding in. The construction company's accounts, frozen. The credit lines, suspended. The new truck, flagged for repossession. "Dad?" His voice cracked. "What's happening?" That's when I smiled. The same smile Grandma had worn in her final days, knowing the chess match was already won. The smile that would haunt Calvin Rourke in whatever cell they put him in. "I believe," Chen said, glancing at the hallway where uniforms were now visible, "there are some people here who'd like to speak with you, Mr. Rourke, about mortgage fraud, elder abuse, and embezzlement." Calvin saw my smile then, saw it and understood, finally, that the mouse he'd cornered had been a cat all along. The moment of realization was beautiful. The moment his fist connected with my face was evidence. The impact was swift and vicious. Calvin's fist connected with my cheekbone with the wet crack of knuckles meeting bone. The conference room exploded into chaos as I fell backward, tasting copper and vindication. "You manipulative little bitch!" Calvin roared, lunging for me again. "You think you've won? I'll destroy you." The mahogany table caught my hip as I stumbled, but I kept my feet. Years of managing violent patients in pediatric psych had taught me to dodge and weave. More importantly, it had taught me to stay calm when violence erupted. Tyler sat frozen, his mouth opening and closing like a landed fish. Mom screamed, reaching for me, but Calvin shoved her back into her chair. The court reporter had pressed herself against the wall, fingers still moving on her machine, documenting every second. "Mr. Rourke," Attorney Morrison tried to intervene, but Calvin was beyond reason now, beyond the careful control he'd maintained for years. The mask hadn't just slipped, it had shattered entirely. He grabbed a crystal paperweight from the table, arm cocked back. That's when the door burst open. "Hartley County Sheriff's Department, weapon down, now!" Deputy Martinez filled the doorway, hand on her service weapon. Behind her, two more deputies and someone I recognized. Jennifer Morse from the DA's office, no longer pretending to be a casual observer. Calvin froze, paperweight still raised. The room held its breath. "Put it down, sir." Deputy Martinez's voice carried the calm authority of someone who'd talked down worse. "Slowly." The paperweight hit the carpet with a dull thud. Calvin's hands went up, but his eyes stayed on me, burning with hatred that would have incinerated a weaker person. "She set me up," he said, voice cracking. "This is entrapment. That will is fraudulent. Violet wasn't competent." "Sir, turn around. Hands behind your back." "You don't understand. I'm Calvin Rourke. I own—" "You're under arrest for assault and battery," Deputy Martinez said, cuffs clicking into place. "You have the right to remain silent." As she read him his rights, Jennifer Morse stepped forward with a thick folder. "Mr. Rourke, I'm Assistant District Attorney Morse. We'll also be charging you with elder financial exploitation, mortgage fraud, and embezzlement. Detectives are executing search warrants at your home and business as we speak." Tyler finally found his voice. Dad, what's happening?" "Shut up, Tyler," Calvin snarled as they led him toward the door. "Call Jacobson. Tell him to—" "Mr. Jacobson is currently in custody as well," Ada Morse informed him pleasantly. "Conspiracy charges. He's been very cooperative." The betrayal in Calvin's eyes was almost artistic. His poker buddy, his tame lawyer, had flipped faster than a pancake on Sunday morning. As they marched him out, Calvin made one last attempt at control. "Elaine, tell them. Tell them how Violet was confused, how she didn't know what she was signing." Mom stood slowly, dignified despite her shaking hands. "The only confused person here is you. Calvin, if you thought I'd betray my mother's memory, or my daughter." The words hit harder than any physical blow could have. Calvin sagged between the deputies, the fight draining out of him as they led him away. Tyler scrambled after them, phone pressed to his ear, probably calling whatever lawyer would take his call. The court reporter kept typing, documenting the aftermath with mechanical precision. "Ms. Whitfield." Ada Morse turned to me. "We'll need you to come to the hospital for documentation of injuries, then to the station for a statement." I touched my cheekbone gingerly. It was already swelling, and I'd have a spectacular bruise for my trouble. But it was worth it for the assault charge, the cherry on top of Calvin's fraud Sunday. "Harper Lowell is my attorney," I said. "She'll meet us there." Morrison nodded approvingly. "Sam, can you finish up here? We'll need certified copies of everything, especially that addendum." "Already prepared," the estate attorney said, producing a stack of documents. "Mrs. Whitfield was very thorough in her instructions." Mom was at my side now, dabbing at my split lip with a handkerchief that smelled like her perfume. "Oh, honey, I'm so sorry. I should have—" "You were surviving," I said, catching her hand. "We both were." "The house?" she said suddenly. "Calvin has keys. His things—" "Being handled," Ada Morse assured her. "We have a locksmith meeting the forensic team there now. Mr. Rourke won't be returning to the property." The relief on Mom's face was like watching years fall away. She straightened, something of her old self emerging from the shadow Calvin had cast. "Good," she said firmly. "Nora, let's get you to the hospital. Then we have a house to reclaim." As we gathered our things, Attorney Morrison cleared his throat. "There's one more matter. Mrs. Whitfield left a letter for you, Nora, to be delivered after the will reading." He handed me a cream envelope with my name in Grandma's spidery script. I opened it carefully, aware of everyone watching. "My dearest Nora," it read, "if you're reading this, then our plan worked. I'm proud of you for seeing what others missed and for having the courage to act. The house is just walls and memories. What matters is that you protected your mother and honored your father's memory. Calvin thought he was playing against an old woman and a young nurse. He never realized he was playing against 3 generations of Whitfield women. All my love, Grandma Violet. P.S. That smile of yours? You got it from me?" I was crying now, good tears that washed away months of tension. Mom read over my shoulder, her own tears falling on the cream paper. She knew, Mom whispered. She knew everything, I confirmed, and she made sure we'd win. Outside, sirens wailed as Calvin was transported to his new reality, one with bars and concrete instead of mahogany and marble. The Rourke dynasty, built on exploitation and sustained by fear, had crumbled in less than an hour. But the Whitfield women remained, battered but unbroken. And we were still smiling. The financial destruction of Calvin Rourke happened with the swift precision of a controlled demolition. While I sat in the emergency room getting my cheekbone x-rayed, his empire crumbled in real time. Harper Lowell arrived at the hospital with a tablet and a satisfied expression. "The judge signed the emergency asset freeze 20 minutes ago," she announced, pulling up documents. "Every account, every property, every piece of equipment with Rourke Construction's name on it, frozen pending investigation." The X-ray tech, who'd been gentle with my swollen face, whistled low. "That's the company doing the Riverside development, right? They just started foundation work." "We're doing," Harper corrected. "The bonding company pulled their coverage an hour ago. No bond, no city contracts." Mom sat beside me, holding an ice pack to my face while Harper walked us through the immediate fallout. The forensic accountants had found what we'd expected: years of fraudulent billing, ghost employees, equipment that existed only on depreciation schedules, but they'd also found more: tax evasion stretching back a decade, OSHA violations buried under bribes, workers' comp claims that had been silenced with threats. "Your grandmother's money was just the latest in a long pattern," Harper explained. "Calvin's been robbing Peter to pay Paul for years. Without her cash infusions, the whole house of cards was always going to collapse." My phone buzzed with texts from Jake at City Planning. "Holy shit! Nora, FBI just showed up with boxes. They're seizing everything." The federal charges were the surprise none of us had seen coming: interstate wire fraud, money laundering, RICO violations that could put Calvin away for decades instead of years. Grandma's evidence had opened a door that led to a maze of financial crimes. "Tyler?" I asked, almost feeling sorry for him. Almost. "Arrested 2 hours ago," Harper said. "Tried to empty the company accounts from his phone. Didn't realize they were already frozen. The attempted theft upgraded him from witness to co-conspirator." The demolition continued through the afternoon. By the time I gave my statement at the police station, face purple and spectacular for the crime scene photos, Calvin's life had imploded completely. The new truck Tyler had bought, repossessed from the company lot, still bearing the dealer tags. The country club membership Calvin treasured, revoked for non-payment of dues he'd been floating on credit. The construction equipment he'd leveraged against Grandma's house, seized and padlocked. Crews locked out of active job sites. His credit cards? Declined when he tried to hire a lawyer from jail. "He's got a public defender now," Ada Morse informed us during my statement. "Jacobson flipped completely, gave us records going back 15 years. Your grandmother wasn't the first elderly person Calvin targeted, just the last." The list she showed us made my stomach turn. 3 other seniors, all with construction liens they didn't understand, all with money mysteriously disappearing. 2 had died before realizing they'd been robbed. The 3rd was in a nursing home, family still trying to untangle the financial mess. "We'll be adding 3 more counts of elder abuse," Morse said. "With the federal charges, Calvin's looking at 25 to life." Mom had been quiet through most of this, processing the magnitude of what she'd married into. Now she spoke up. "What about restitution? Those other families, can they recover anything?" "The asset forfeiture will help," Morse explained. "Rourke Construction had more value on paper than in reality, but there's enough to make partial restitution. The Violet Whitfield Trust will have priority claim for documented losses." Harper had been busy on that front. Between the fraudulent mortgage, the drained accounts, and interest, Calvin owed the trust nearly $400,000. The construction company's liquidation would cover most of it. "The house is safe," Harper assured Mom. "Free and clear, held in trust. Calvin can't touch it from prison." Prison. The word hung in the air like a promise fulfilled. That evening, we returned to the Victorian on Elmwood Drive with a police escort. The forensic team had finished, leaving behind fingerprint dust and evidence tags. Calvin's office had been stripped bare, his files boxed and labeled for prosecution. Tyler's room looked like a tornado had hit. He'd tried to pack in a panic before his arrest. Designer clothes spilled from garbage bags, expensive electronics tangled in hasty knots. The deputy with us shook his head. Kid tried to claim this was all his personal property, had receipts in his dad's name for everything. We spent the evening with the locksmith, systematically changing every lock Calvin had installed. The front door, the back door, the garage he'd claimed as his domain. Each new key felt like reclaiming territory. "Master bedroom?" the locksmith asked. Mom looked at me, then squared her shoulders. "Yes, especially that one." As we worked, updates kept coming. Calvin's lawyer friends abandoning him like rats from a sinking ship. Subcontractors filing liens for unpaid work. The IRS announcing an audit going back 7 years. "It's like dominoes," Mom said wonderingly. "One push and everything falls." "Grandma knew," I said, pocketing the new keys. She knew exactly which domino to tip. The final blow came via text from Harper at 9 p.m. "Bail denied. Calvin deemed flight risk and danger to witnesses. That's you. Remanded to county pending trial." Mom and I sat in Grandma's kitchen, our kitchen now, and opened a bottle of wine she'd hidden behind the vacuum cleaner. "To Violet Whitfield," Mom toasted, "who played the long game and won." "To Grandma," I agreed, touching my glass to hers, "who taught me that patience beats power every time." Outside, Calvin's kingdom lay in ruins. His signs had been removed from job sites, his trucks impounded, his reputation shredded beyond repair. The Rourke name, once synonymous with construction and mill water, would now forever mean fraud. But inside the Victorian on Elmwood, 2 Whitfield women sat at their grandmother's table, in their own home, finally free. The bruise on my face would fade. Calvin's prison sentence would not. Justice, served cold and thorough, exactly as Grandma Violet had planned. The locksmith finished installing the last deadbolt as autumn sunlight streamed through the Victorian's original stained glass. I signed the work order with my left hand, my right still wrapped from the confrontation, and accepted the ring of new keys like a ceremony. "All set, Ms. Whitfield," he said, packing his tools. "These locks are pick-resistant, bump-proof. Nobody's getting in without your say-so." Mom stood in the doorway of what had been Calvin's office, now stripped of his presence. The forensic team had taken everything. Files, computers, even the pretentious diplomas he'd hung to impress clients. Only nail holes remained, like scars on the walls. "We should paint," she said quietly. "Something bright? Grandma would have liked yellow." "Yellow it is," I agreed, adding it to the list Harper had started. A documentation of everything needed to reclaim our home. The doorbell rang, still playing Grandma's chosen tune, the opening notes of La Vie en Rose. Deputy Martinez stood on the porch with final paperwork. "Temporary restraining order," she said, handing me the documents. "Permanent hearing in 2 weeks, but given the criminal charges, it's just a formality. Calvin Rourke won't be coming within 500 feet of this property or either of you." "And Tyler?" Mom asked. "Released on bail with conditions, his lawyers negotiating a plea deal, testifying against his father in exchange for reduced charges." Martinez shook her head. "Kid's finally learning that Daddy can't fix everything." After she left, we walked through each room, reclaiming spaces that had been hostile territory for so long. The dining room where Calvin had held court, the living room where Tyler had sprawled like an occupying force, the garage he'd commandeered for his tools and toys. "We'll donate it all," Mom decided, looking at the abandoned sports equipment and half-finished projects. "Start fresh." Harper arrived as we were cataloging Calvin's abandoned belongings. "Final numbers from the forensic accountants," she announced, spreading papers on Grandma's dining table. Between the fraudulent loans and the skimmed money, Calvin stole $312,000 from your grandmother over 18 months. Can we recover it? I asked. Most of it. The construction company had more assets than debts. Barely. Once liquidated, the estate gets first claim as a secured creditor. Should see about $275,000 after legal fees. And the other families he robbed? Mom hadn't forgotten them. There's a fund being established. The DA's office is coordinating with elder services. It won't make them whole, but it's something. Harper produced one last document. The trust paperwork is finalized. The house is protected in perpetuity. It can't be sold or mortgaged without both trustees agreeing. Your mother has lifetime residency, and you inherit upon her passing, exactly as Violet wanted. Mom took my hand. I want to add something, a codicil stating that if anything happens to me, the house is yours immediately. No waiting, no probate. Calvin taught me the danger of delayed justice. We signed papers as the sun set, making Grandma's protections even stronger. Each signature felt like laying another brick in the wall protecting what remained of our family. That night, for the first time in years, Mom and I cooked dinner together in our own kitchen. No walking on eggshells, no watching the clock for Calvin's return, no Tyler demanding to be served first. Just two women, healing over pasta and honest conversation. I'm sorry, Mom said again, but I stopped her. We survived. That's what matters. Your father would be proud, she said softly. The way you protected us both. You're stronger than I ever was. You're stronger than you think, I countered. You stood up when it mattered. Grandma saw that in you, even when you couldn't. We cleared the table, our table, in our house, and Mom pulled out photo albums Calvin had banished to the basement. Pictures of Dad, of Grandma in her youth, of family gatherings before the darkness came. We'll hang these again, Mom declared. Make this home ours. My phone buzzed with a message from the ADA. Thought you'd want to know. Calvin's been placed in protective custody. Seems some of his construction crews had family members he'd cheated. Even criminals don't like elder abuse. I showed Mom, who surprised me by laughing. Not cruel, just free. Grandma always said karma had a way of finding people, even in county jail. The next morning, I returned to work at the hospital with my spectacular bruise and a new sense of purpose. Dr. Martinez took one look and whistled. Elder abuse case? She guessed. I heard about the Rourke arrests. You did good. Nora. Grandma did good, I corrected. I just followed her lead. That afternoon, a courier delivered an envelope to the nurse's station. Inside, a single key and a note in Grandma's handwriting. Check the attic crawl space above your old room. Some treasures are worth hiding. V. Mom and I investigated that evening, finding a vintage hat box wrapped in plastic. Inside, Grandma's real jewelry, the pieces she'd hidden when Calvin started inventorying assets, her wedding ring, a pearl necklace from my grandfather, and a sapphire brooch that had been her mother's. She protected everything that mattered, Mom breathed, fastening the pearls around her neck, just like she protected us. At the bottom of the box, another note. For my girls, who were worth more than all the treasures in the world, wear these and remember, we are Whitfield women, we endure, we survive, and we protect our own. I stood in my childhood bedroom, wearing my grandmother's sapphire brooch, looking out at the garden she'd loved. The Victorian on Elmwood Drive was ours again, free and clear. Calvin's shadow had lifted, Tyler's threats had evaporated, and the locks were changed. Mom appeared in the doorway with tea, a ritual we'd started that first night of freedom. Grandma would be proud, she said simply. She knew, I replied, touching the brooch. She knew we'd make it through. Together, Mom agreed, and we stood side by side, Whitfield women reclaiming our heritage, our home, our lives. The criminal trials would come, Calvin facing decades, Tyler negotiating for leniency. There would be testimony and publicity and the slow grind of justice, but that was tomorrow's challenge. Tonight we were home. Thank you so much for listening to this story. Where are you tuning in from today? I'd love to hear in the comments below. If this story of justice and family resilience resonated with you, please consider subscribing to the channel and sharing your thoughts. What would you have done in Nora's situation? Let's discuss in the comments.